Good evening and welcome to my How Healthy Are You weekly educational call. My name is Dr. Thomas Brewer. I'm a PhD chemist, and as mentioned last week in today's call, I'm going to be giving a lot of details for the slow carb diet. This is a diet I have been advocating for about 10 years now. It is the absolute best way to burn fat. It is fun. There's no other diet like it, and it is very safe and very effective, something I can't say about any other diet. Most of the diets out there are either unhealthy or outright dangerous or just ineffective because you can't maintain the diet. So part of the effectiveness of a diet, if you're trying to lose fat, so fat weight, is the ability to keep doing it, to stick with it, and to get results. And I have not found any diet that comes close to the success rate of the slow carb diet. You may have never heard of the slow carb diet because it does not get a lot of publicity like the keto diet and the other diets out there that are popular. At one point, there was the Atkins diet that was extremely popular. That was about 20 or 30 years ago. There's been the Mediterranean diet, which is just a nice, healthy way to eat. It's not really for extreme fat loss. It would be very slow to lose fat using the Mediterranean diet. It's just a nice way to stay healthy. And many other diets out there, a lot of them are calorically restrictive, things you just can't keep doing. With the slow carb diet, it's quite simple, but I'll be going into some more details because over the years I've heard all the questions, so I'm just going to answer the questions, and then everyone listening to this call will know exactly what to do. So if you remember from my carbohydrate hierarchy video, I was mentioning the difference between good and bad carbohydrate sources. And at the top of that list, the best carbohydrate source food was vegetables. And so that's what we're going to do. Since vegetables are mainly carbohydrates, we're going to get all of our carbohydrates from vegetables 6 days per week. And that's basically the entire diet. Without going into detail, that's it. Because on the seventh day, you get to eat anything you want, so you're most likely going to choose every carbohydrate you're not supposed to eat during the 6 days. So that would be donuts and pizza, desserts, things with sugar, things with flour. So during the 6 days, it is normally taught the slow carbohydrate diet that you're not eating any white carbohydrate foods. Of course, that's wrong because cauliflower is white and it's a carbohydrate. But that's typically how the slow carbohydrate diet is taught. Avoid white carbohydrates for 6 days. It's much better to think of it as get all of your carbohydrates from vegetables for 6 days per week. So what that means is there's no fruit during those 6 days because fruit isn't a vegetable and fruit contains carbohydrates. It also means there's no dairy because if you read the side of a milk carton, you'll see that dairy contains lactose, and lactose is a carbohydrate. Most of the carbohydrates end in OSE. So therefore, dairy is out for those 6 days. So on the 7th day, you'll probably be craving something with dairy in it. And then, of course, flour. But the old way of describing the slow carbohydrate diet was no white carbohydrates. Well, what about brown rice and whole grain flour? Well, they're out because they're not a vegetable. And that's why thinking of the diet in terms of getting all of your carbohydrates from vegetables is very complete. It's a complete way to think about the diet. So the questions that come up, one is potato, since potato is considered a vegetable, but unfortunately it's one of those white ones. It's white on the inside, and they're out. And then the next question is going to be, well, what about yams and sweet potatoes and purple potatoes? And I believe you can include those once you've been on the diet for a month or so. You can include a small amount of those as a carbohydrate source, but really you shouldn't. I mean, the fact that you can once you get rolling is a little different than it being a good idea. It's just that the potatoes are considered a starchy carbohydrate, and that's really what the word white carbohydrate means. It means it's starchy, and so it's a high glycemic index carbohydrate as the potatoes. But when they're orange and purple, they have a lot of other nutritional properties. But in the beginning, just avoid all potatoes. Rice, of course, it's out. It's a grain, and so we don't have any grain-based carbohydrates 6 days per week. And that would be all grains, even oats. So even that great breakfast that most of you are doing where you start with the lemon water and wait 30 minutes and have celery juice and then wait 30 minutes and have oatmeal with berries in it, that's something you won't be able to do. The big challenge when we diet is we have to have this tremendous focus, and it usually means we can only do one thing. So if you want to maintain health and help get viruses out of the body, increase the immune system, and shrink the prostate, etc., by starting your morning routine the way I described, well, you're not going to be able to do that and burn fat with the slow carbohydrate diet. So when you just have to focus on something and stick with it, and then change gears, change diets, change lifestyles as you reach your goals. So slow carbohydrate diet is considered a somewhat boring diet because you tend to eat only a few things every day. So I talked about carbohydrates. Well, what about protein and fat? So protein sources are typically eggs and various meats and fish and beans and peas. And, of course, pea solves both issues because it's a vegetable and somewhat of a protein source. So this sort of diet is tough to do if you're vegetarian or vegan. I mean, if you're vegetarian, the eggs would be a source of protein. But if you're vegan, this would be a tough diet to get enough protein because normally vegans are consuming rice and whole grain rice as a protein source, and they wouldn't be able to do that with this diet. So again, when you focus on something, you'll end up being a little more restricted, and maybe this diet won't work for people that are vegan, because it's going to be very difficult to be vegan and on the slow-carb diet. So it's hard to duplicate or add to various diets and routines. Once you add the second diet or the second routine to something you're already doing, it gets very restrictive, and it approaches being impossible very quickly. So protein sources, usually not a problem. And then fat sources, same fat sources you're used to, the good oils, olive oil, coconut oil. Of course, nuts and seeds work great on this diet because it's a protein and a fat source. Now we're going to get into some of the pitfalls of this diet, where we're essentially going into a mild state of ketosis without being damaging. So the keto diet is a very carbohydrate restrictive diet. This is not a low or restrictive carbohydrate diet. This is a slow burning, slow carb diet. Therefore, there are lots of carbohydrates consumed. They just happen to be from vegetables. And if you think about it, vegetables are not a great protein source except for the peas, and they're not a great fat source except for the avocados. So we're going to eat vegetables as our protein source, and people are going to have normal questions about, well, how am I going to be full? Well, part of the problem of being full is we store fat, and you end up being plenty full when you eat vegetables as your carbohydrate source, but you also want to have vegetables at every meal. So therefore, you are having carbohydrates at every meal. Since vegetables are carbohydrates, you're having vegetables at every meal, you're having carbohydrates at every meal. And that is a key to health, is to eat all three macronutrients at every single meal. So protein, carbohydrates, and fat at every meal. The challenge is, where do you get your carbohydrates and fat? Usually the protein source isn't a challenge, but the carbohydrate and fat source is. So we've solved part of that problem, because the carbohydrate source is going to be vegetables, and then the fat source is going to be the healthy fats, which we all know: coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, and then whole foods, meaning the whole avocado, the whole nut, the whole seed. So instead of eating oils for fat, it would be the food that would normally be pressed to make that oil. A common pitfall in this diet is to try to fill up on fat then, and that is a no-no. So you can't just eat a lot of hummus or a lot of avocados and expect to burn a lot of fat, because there's a point where you're just putting too much fat into the body and you will store fat. These foods are good. You can have a small amount of hummus. You can have a handful of nuts per day. You can have half an avocado per day. But don't eat too much fat, and especially don't take in too much oil. And that's something I see under the microscope, these little specks of chylus in people's blood, and it's from consuming huge amounts of olive oil and coconut oil, and it's too much for the liver. And then that excess fat is very calorically concentrated and gets stored in our bodies. So don't have too much fat. Other question is drinking, and so you don't want to drink your carbohydrates. So sugar is out, since any food with sugar is a carbohydrate, and so anything with added sugar is out. So it is somewhat restrictive. Enjoy your water, enjoy your unsweetened tea, and unsweetened coffee and things like that. A question that comes up with sweeteners is what kind of sweeteners can you use? And we live in a society where people really like sweet. They like things that are sweet. And so the stevia is okay. Sometimes it's pronounced stevia. It is a plant-based, and if you can handle it, then enjoy. But you can't have that. It's very low or no carbohydrate. It's extremely sweet, 30 times sweeter than sugar, and hard to deal with. Then if you get a stevia product, make sure it's 100%. Make sure there's no other sugars added. The other question I get a lot is, well, what about sugar substitutes, other sweeteners? They're normally known as sugar alcohols, and they're no carbohydrate. So you can have these. The problem is they're very hard on your gut bacteria, your microbiome, your probiotics. So I don't recommend them, but technically you can have them on this diet. A couple things then is on cheat day, which is your seventh day. Some people would have asked me, well, I just won't have a cheat day. I'll just keep going. Well, it doesn't work that way because the body needs that carbohydrate load, that high glycemic sugar carbohydrate load to reset the thyroid so that during the next 6 days you end up burning more fat than if you didn't have that cheat day. Now, normally people are just trying to show off, saying they're not going to do the cheat day. Of course they are. You're going to live for that cheat day, to the fact that you'll be writing down on a whiteboard all the foods you're going to have on your cheat day and all the things you're craving. And that's all fine. You can do that and enjoy yourself. What you'll find is that on cheat day, you won't be able to eat nearly as much of those nasty foods that you're craving. And it's because after 6 days of not filling up on these high glycemic index foods, even though your brain will crave them, your stomach really won't appreciate them, and you'll fill up very fast, and you'll feel bloated, and you'll feel uncomfortable. And then after 3 or 4 days into the next cycle, you'll still make another list of cheat foods and do it all over again, feel horrible on that 7th day eating those foods, and you'll do it again over and over and over. It's just the way our brains work. We want those foods, and we want to like them. And but you'll find that you'll have meals, and every one of your meals you won't be bloated, and that's because you're not consuming any high glycemic index carbohydrates. You're only consuming vegetables as a carbohydrate source. Now, a question that comes up a lot is about eating out, and you can eat at any restaurant you want with this diet. You can even eat at fast food restaurants. So you're basically consuming 2 vegetables and a protein source as a meal. It could be a frozen dinner that's a vegetable or 2 with a protein source like meat or fish. Not rice, but just vegetables and meat. It could be a salad with a protein source on top, whether it's chicken or beef or some other meat or fish, like tuna or salmon. You can get this at any restaurant. You can get a salad at any restaurant and put a protein source on top, whether it's eggs or meat. And you can even do this at fast food restaurants. You could buy chicken and take it off the bun and then put it on a salad. So you can go to any restaurant and eat this way. You can go to a Thai restaurant get something like spicy basil, just have no rice, use the steamed vegetables, you'll be fine. You can go to a Mexican restaurant, you'll get fajitas. What are fajitas? Vegetables and meat on a stick. And all you're doing is you're not eating tortillas, and you won't be eating the chips. You'll feel great. Everyone else will be bloated at the table, and they won't even know that you're not eating any fast burn carbohydrates. So you'll have a lot of fun with this diet, especially on cheat day. After 2, 3, 4 weeks, you'll be down probably 10 pounds or so, and you can tell your friends you're on a new diet and have them visit with you on cheat day, and they can see how you eat, and they'll be flabbergasted at what you're eating. You'll probably be having a cinnamon bun and washing it down with a soda or something like that. And it's good because people think that's your diet, but you earned that cheat day. Okay. A couple of other things to enhance the cheat day. First, cheat day is not 24 hours, it's 12 hours. So cheat day, if it's a Saturday, doesn't start at 12:01 a.m. Friday night. So cheat day is a 12-hour span during your cheat day. Another thing to do that enhances the elimination of getting too much sugar into your system, so you get this insulin release. And insulin release is a problem with fat storage. So to minimize that, if you do some sort of exercise for 60 seconds or so before every cheat meal, you'll have far less damage from the cheat meal. You don't have to do this. It's just a way to take it to the next level. So you could go up and down knee bends or no weight squats. You could run in place. You could do jumping jacks. You could do push-ups against the wall. You could do push-ups on the floor. You do anything for about 60 seconds and then have that cheat meal. If you're with your friends, excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and do some air squats, and you'll be fine. Another question I get is any supplement one can take that enhances the fat loss, and that is alpha-lipoic acid. It's known as ALA. It's absolutely one of the best ways to enhance fat loss because it minimizes the absorption of sugars or these high glycemic carbs, especially on your cheat day. So you can get alpha-lipoic acid at most any vitamin store, and the dosage is going to be right on the bottle. It's just going to be the standard dosage. And I'm thinking if there's anything else to cover. If there is, I can cover it in next week's call, but that probably covers 99% of people's questions. Some people ask if they can exercise during this diet. The answer is yes. If you're not used to exercise, I recommend you don't overdo it because when you start an exercise program, you end up trying to eat more. And but you're fine exercising. Make sure you drink enough water, especially on your cheat day. So make sure you keep your water intake at the normal level. It's also important during the diet is to eat within an hour of waking up. And this is something people miss out on throughout their lives. They spend too much time before having their first meal of the day. It's important to get the metabolism started. And whether it's cheat day or not, you want to consume a meal within an hour of getting up. 30 minutes is even better. And again, this specifically for most people, but also the slow carbohydrate diet. I get a question sometimes about canned foods. Canned foods are fine. Salsas, it just depends on the ingredients. Most of the questions is, are there carbohydrates, at least the answer to the question, are there carbohydrates, and is the carbohydrate coming from a vegetable? If it's not coming from a vegetable, it's out. So that's all of the questions. Spices are really good. I recommend you spice up your vegetables because you're going to have them at every meal. You're just not having fruits during those 6 days. It's somewhat, like I said, of a boring diet because you're eating pretty much vegetables and meat. Most of your meals are vegetables and eggs, vegetables and beans, things like that. Common breakfast is going to be eggs, beans, and some vegetables, whether it's spinach or red pepper or orange pepper or yellow pepper or something like that. And lunch is typically a salad with meat on top or something like that. Dressings are the best is vinegar and olive oil and a small amount of olive oil. Snacks are going to be nuts, and typically nut butter on celery is ideal. As a snack, it's known as a Lincoln log. Just make sure your nut butter has no sugar in it. So it's just 100% made from nuts. Dinners are typically a meat and 2 vegetables. Dinners can even be similar to your lunch, a salad with meat on top of it. So somewhat boring. You're obviously not having desserts for 6 days, but it's very effective and a lot of fun because you live for that cheat day. Most diets, there is no end to the diet. And with this diet, it's only 6 days, and pretty much anyone can do something for 6 days, especially seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You get to eat anything you want and still burn fat. And that's what's great about this diet. You go into a safe form of ketosis, like the keto diet, without it being dangerous. You don't make massive amounts of ammonia, which are very toxic to the body. And that's what happens when you go into full ketosis. So that's all I have today. I was going to talk about vaccines. I'm going to talk about vaccines next week because this call got a little long, and that's what happens when I try to explain this diet to people in the office. So I can now refer people to this call. They can learn all about the slow carbohydrate diet. So thanks for listening, and next week I'll be talking about vaccines.